Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this Tuesday, December 17th, 2019, last meeting of the year 2019, meeting of the full county board. And at this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'd like to point out that there are some Scriveners errors for members to refer to in the packet, so I'm going to call on Mr. Casely to point out the pages for those for you before we get started.
All right. I would propose a correction of a Scrivener's error by inserting the word day or days in page 67 and the Anderson consulting agreement. And it just is missing from the fee paragraph. So I'd like to put in 30 days. And in item 2C, a contract agreement with a special public defender on page 80. Approval of a contract with Kelly Harms, a special public defender. I'd like to remove the his's and put in hers. And likewise, in 2D, the contract between the county and the Public Defender's Office and Jennifer Patton, the same thing. And in regard to 2F, with Stephanie Wisner, one of hers is correct and one is wrong, and I think we should make them both feminine pronouns. And that's it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Duly noted. We'll make the corrections. Staff will be directed to do that. Okay, at this time, will we please rise for the invocation by Member Gordon?
We give thanks to you, our Creator, for the many gifts you have bestowed upon us. The gift of life itself, wonder beyond words. The world around us so filled with beauty, and the richness of the earth which day by day sustains us. Guard and protect the health of all our board members, our staff, and our family members, and the health and strength of all who serve our citizens. Be with those who help to ease people's pain, resolve their difficulties, and fulfill their needs. We pray that you will be with our neighbors who will celebrate Kwanzaa in the coming weeks. Be also with our neighbors who celebrate the Jewish festival of Hanukkah. And we pray that you will be with our neighbors who celebrate Christmas, a time of great joy and deep meaning. Guide the leaders of this nation and of all nations in paths of righteous acts, compassion, and humility. Inspire us this evening with wisdom, vision, courage, and mutual respect as we act on behalf of all whom we serve. Amen.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
County Clerk, please call the roll.
Logan Smith. James Oldner. Gerald Thompson. Shana Wachinski. Absent. George Wendt. Lori Wilbrad. Josh Barnett. Jacob Beard. Lindsay Bloomfield. William Casely.
Present.
Sharon Chung.
Present.
Chuck Erickson.
Present.
William John Friedrich.
Present.
George Gordon.
Present.
Elizabeth Johnston.
Here.
Randall Martin.
Present.
Catherine Metzger.
Present.
Carla Robistelli. Susan Schaefer. John McIntyre.
Here, let the record show Mrs. Wachinski just came in, so we have 20 members present and none absent, and we do have a quorum. We have one member of the public who's applied to speak for us, Ms. Carla Bailey Smith. Carla, would you like to come to the podium up here?
Okay, hello? Yes.
You have 3 minutes to speak. It's on the screen back there.
Okay.
Smith, thank you.
All right, hi, my name is Carla Bailey Smith. I'm here as a concerned member of the community. I wanted to speak in support of allowing cannabis in our rural and unincorporated areas of McLean County. I attended the board meeting last night and heard a variety of arguments for and against having establishments, having on-site consumption. But this in particular, I think it's important to look at the town of Delavan in Tazewell County and allowing the cultivation operation in Delavan has the city has gotten about $300,000 tax dollars a year for that facility, and they're only going to get more because of that site growing for recreational use. And I think it would be irresponsible to support not allowing our rural areas to have growing, processing, transportation, infusing sites. We have empty warehouses. We have people who need jobs. We have other sites that are disused at this time and could be repurposed. I want to say, why would you disenfranchise our farmers in McLean County? We could be growing recreational and medicinal marijuana right here in McLean County and getting revenue for our schools. I would like to remind the county board members that the City of Bloomington Planning Commission has already done extensive research, which is now available for you to read. They have done the work. They have looked at all of the possible zoning problems. I reviewed that before I came to speak today. I think most of your questions can be answered by reading that report from the Planning Commission, and I encourage you to do so. Also, I encourage you not to give in to fear. Fear that was started by the Nixon administration's war on drugs. At the same time Nixon declared his war on drugs, his own administration had done a study on marijuana and declared it reasonably safe, that it was not a dangerous drug. They stifled that information and because the Nixon administration wanted to stifle the anti-war movement and minorities. And I encourage you not to give in and perpetuate that fear, because if you do, you are perpetuating stigmatization of minorities and also stigmatization of a legal substance that has been shown to have very valid medicinal purposes for many different issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll move on the agenda. You have the consent agenda in front of you. What say you? Motion by member Worab.
I move that we accept it as presented.
Motion to accept the consent agenda as presented. Is there a second? Second by member Barnett. Any comments or questions?
I just wanted to be sure that the corrections already pointed out by Member Casely will be duly incorporated as he noted them, and I hope we caught all of them. I think we did.
Okay, thank you. Duly noted. Let the record show that member Lindsay Bloomfield will abstain from item on page 2 to E, 2, I, and J. Is that correct? Okay. Thank you. Anyone else have comments, additions, or corrections to the consent agenda? If none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. We'll move on. I'd like to have Mrs. Susan Hartzell join me up at the podium. Welcome. In case you don't know, Mrs. Hartzell has been an outstanding mainstay over at the museum with all of her excellent exhibits that she has done, and she's received a recent reward. If you haven't been over there and seen some of the exhibits that the museum does, you should really take time and do that. Some of them are very moving and a great experience, and so I just want to congratulate you and present you with this resolution, which I will read at this time. Whereas Susan Hartzell is a lifelong McLean County resident and graduate of Illinois State University, and whereas Susan Hartzell has served the McLean County Museum of History for 28 years as curator of collections and exhibits, completing 42 exhibits at the Museum of History, including overseeing and coordinating the 4 new permanent exhibits at the museum entitled Challenges, Choices, and Changes, as well as Lincoln in McLean County. And whereas Susan Hartzell has won 3 national awards for previous exhibits, one, A Turbulent Time, Perspectives of the Vietnam War, 2008 through 2010, another, Journey Through the Great Depression, 2004 through 2007, and one called Just Corn, The Amazing Story, 1997. And whereas Susan Hartzell was awarded on November 12th, the Illinois Association of Museums Lifetime Professional Achievement Award, and whereas Susan Hartzell has helped preserve, share, and bring to life the fascinating history of McLean County through her thorough scholarship and engaging designs, therefore be it resolved that this McLean County Board and the citizens of McLean County congratulate Susan Hartzell on her recent well-deserved Illinois Association of Museums Lifetime Professional Achievement Award, and looks forward to her continued work to share our McLean County story with local and statewide residents, as well as visitors from throughout the nation and around the world. Be it further resolved that the McLean County Board hereby directs the county clerk to prepare a certified copy of this resolution to present it to Ms. Hartzell with our sincere congratulations, adopted by the McLean County Board the 17th day of December 2019. Congratulations. And I should hand it to you. I'd like to say a few words. I think you should.
I'm not a public speaker, but I will say that any work that I've done, it's been as part of a team. If you've been to the museum, if you know any of the staff there, they're all very passionate about their work, including our interim executive director, Greg Coos, who is working with us again. But it can't be done without the team, and it's greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations. We'll move on to the report of the standing committees. First off, Executive Committee, Vice Chairman Solner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Executive Committee has no items for action. There are a number of reports, and our general report is found in the unapproved minutes. I'd be glad to answer any questions. I would like to comment and compliment you on your facial hair. I think it's very, very good. But again,
Strangely reminiscent of yours. Right?
I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Let's move on to the report of the Health Committee Chair, Member Schaefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Health Committee has no items for action today, and our general report can be found on pages 2 through 8 of the unapproved minutes packet.
Thank you. Move on to the report of the Land Use and Development Committee, Chairman Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Land Use and Development Committee has no items to be presented for action, and our general report can be found on pages 29 through 33 of the unapproved minutes.
Thank you, sir. We'll move on to the report of the Transportation Committee. Chairman Kaisley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We bring 3 items for action today. The first one is a recodification of the county weight limits on county highways. And we have been going about adding additional 40-ton weight limits as highways have been improved, and now we want to put them all in one place and recodify them, and so I move that.
Motion by Chairman Kaisley, second by Member Johnston. Comments or questions? If none, all in favor of the resolution as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried.
Then we have a request for an emergency appropriation for design of a bridge out in Lawndale Township, and I move that, and this requires a 2/3 vote.
Sir, motion by Member Kaisley. Is there a second? Second by Member Friedrich. Comments or questions? If none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any dissenting votes to be recorded? If none, then the motion stands unanimously.
The third item is a replacement of a bridge out in Dale Township. And this bridge is very special. It is the last timber pile bridge that we have in McLean County. And it is obsolete, and we would like to spend $900,000 to build a new bridge, and $10,000 would come from the county's funds and $10,000 from the township, and the rest would be federal participation, and I move that.
Motion by Member Kaisley, second. Second by Member Solner. Comments or questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Give the Transportation Department and Mr. Stokes a big hand for all these bridges over there. We finally got it done.
Our general report is in the unapproved minutes.
Thank you, sir. We'll move on to the report of the Property Committee. Chairman Barnett.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Property Committee brings forward 2 items for action before the board this evening. Item E1A, request approval of amendment to amended and restated lease between the County of McLean and the Public Building Commission, found on page 187 of the packet, and I would so move that.
Motion by Chairman Barnett. Is there a second? Second by Member Thompson. Comments or questions? Any discussion? If none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion's carried.
Thank you, sir. The next item is E1B, request approval of amendment to the contract for operation and maintenance between the County of McLean and the Public Building Commission, found on page 197 of the meeting packet, and I would so move that.
Motion by Chairman Barnett. Is there a second? Second by Member Thompson. Comments or questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Property Committee brings forward no other items for action. Our general report may be found in the unapproved minutes.
Thank you. We'll move on to the report of the Justice Committee. Chairman Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Justice Committee brings 2 items for action before the board this evening. Item F1A, request approval of an intergovernmental agreement between the City of Bloomington and the County of McLean, regulating the use by the County of McLean of the police shooting range facility of the City of Bloomington, pages 199 through 203 of our packet, and I'll move that.
Motion by Chairman Gordon, second by Member Martin. Any comments or questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried.
Item F1B, request approval of an amendment to the contract with ISU Stevenson Center for data and research services through the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, pages 204 through 207, and I'll move that.
Motion by Chairman Gordon, second by Member Schaefer. Comments or questions? Member Johnston.
Thank you. I just asked that I abstain from this vote.
Let the record show that Member Johnson abstains from voting. Any other questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you. The Justice Committee has no other items for action. Our general report can be found in the unapproved minutes, pages 14 through 18.
Thank you. We'll move on to the report of the Finance Committee. Chairman Soldner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Finance has 3 items today for action. The first one, G1A, request approval of an emergency appropriation ordinance, amending the McLean County fiscal year 2020 combined annual appropriation and budget ordinance, General Fund 001, Animal Control Department 0032. This requires a 2/3 vote. I wanted to mention that we are very fortunate to have lots of generous people in our county that donate to animal control, and that's what some of this money's for. So I make that motion.
Motion by Chairman Solner, second. Second by Member Kaisley. Comments or questions? If none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any dissenting votes to be recorded? If none, then the motion stands unanimously.
Next is item G1B, request approval for selection of Clifton Larson Allen LLP as McLean County's external auditor for year ending December 31st, 2019, with the option to add services for 2 additional years, 2020 and 2021, and authorize the county board chairman to enter into a letter agreement for those auditing services. I so move.
Motion by Chairman Solner, second by Member Gordon. Comments or questions? If none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried.
Next item, G1C, request approval of an ordinance to amend Chapter 108, Section 56 of the McLean County Code regarding insurance benefits for certain workers' compensation recipients. I so move.
Motion by Chairman Solner. Is there a second? Second by Member Johnston. Comments or questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried.
Those are the only action items we have. Our general report is in the unapproved minutes. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. We'll go on to the report of the county administrator, Ms. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Chairman. I have some items for action under my area, and at this time, I'd like to share that Member Erickson, pursuant to county board rules, provided me with requests in writing as detailed in the memo contained within the county board packet, requesting that these items be placed in the county board packet and for an item action. And I am going to defer to Member Erickson to read those items. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, County Administrator. First item is item is H1A, request approval of a resolution of the McLean County Board authorizing all electoral authorities within the County of McLean to submit the cannabis growing, processing, and infusing advisory question to the voters of McLean County, and I so move.
Motion by Chairman Erickson. Comments or questions? Any second? Second by Member Solner. I'm sorry. Now comments or questions? Would you like the floor?
Yes, thank you. Can't decide if I'm on here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I submitted the cover letter with the resolutions, I was asked numerous questions about them. And I would just ask for the chairman's indulgence to try to answer some of those questions. So I'm going to try to go through those and try to answer those questions. The first question I received is there a way to limit the referendum to only the unincorporated areas? And the answer is no, for 2 reasons. One, practical, and the other, legal. First, precincts are not drawn to include unincorporated lines, and thus precincts cannot be cut up along unincorporated lines. That's what I was advised. Second, legally, I was advised that the state statute requires the referendum to be countywide. So that was the first question I was asked. The second question, another question I was asked is it fair that unincorporated areas will have policy dictated by all the county? I would say the county government represents the entire county, not just the unincorporated areas. If we get to the point where we have to vote straight up or down to opt out, say the advisory referendum gets defeated, then I get to vote and the entire board gets to vote, and I nor others represent unincorporated areas. We've always had this issue, elected representatives not representing unincorporated areas, deciding policy in the unincorporated areas. Wind farms are one example. The only way to resolve this, and I don't know what it is to have county government that represents the unincorporated areas, which I don't think is practical and it's not ever going to happen. So in other words, there's no practical way to isolate the unincorporated areas in this vote. It can't be done by ballot, and it can't be done by the way we vote on the county board. So that was the second question that I had received. Another question I received is, well, what if I would like to see revenue come in from cannabis sales? I do want to point out that the advisory referendums are broken down by statutory definition. The question is worded as follows: should adult use of cannabis dispensaries be prohibited in the unincorporated areas in McLean County? This was written to allow the sale of cannabis in the unincorporated areas where it could be taxed with the sales tax assessment. The second question is, should adult use cannabis growing, processing, transporting, and infusing businesses be prohibited in the unincorporated areas of McLean County? And that was the second question. Thus, the ability to earn revenue off cannabis dispensaries could pass. I put it in the advisory referendum. There's two questions in the advisory referendum. It could pass. And growing, processing, transporting, and infusing businesses could be prohibited or vice versa. So far, that is what the city of Bloomington did last night. That is a fact if the Bloomington Pantograph is to be believed. The referendums or referenda are plural, not singular. They're two different ones. And they take into account the views of the entire electorate as to some wanting to have revenue and some wanting to forbid it altogether. I'm going to skip some of these to speed this up, Mr. Chairman, but if the county opts out, won't that prevent the county from taxing the sale of cannabis? The lawyers here can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I always advise the answer is yes and no. Yes, if no dispensaries are allowed in the unincorporated areas, then they cannot be taxed. I think that's a true statement. But the county still retains the right, whether it opts out or not, to tax the sale of cannabis in any municipality in the county which allows the sale of cannabis, including Bloomington Normal. So I think that's the issue there.
Member Erickson, one point of information. Are you wanting to have items H1A and B considered jointly? Because we need to know if there's discussion on each one and vote.
No, I'd like to have them separate.
Okay, so we are now on H1A.
Yes.
Okay.
I understand, Mr. Chairman, what you're asking. I'm addressing both resolutions at this point, but I'll try to make this brief. I do want to address what the Land Use Committee did, so people understand that. Didn't the Land Use Committee propose a text amendment addressing cannabis to the Zoning Board of Appeals? Yes. But this in no way, what we're trying to do here, hinders their work, in my view. There was a debate at Land Use as to whether doing nothing allowed these types of businesses without any zoning requirements. It was decided by the committee to propose something and to get this started so we could have some sort of regulatory scheme in place. The committee reached a consensus recommendation, and we sent it to the Zoning Board of Appeals, which is scheduled to hear it on January 7th of 2020. Assuming they pass something, it will be before the full county board on January 21st. The recommendation anticipates the recommendation that the Land Use Committee made to the Zoning Board of Appeals anticipates the county is not opting out. I think that's fair from the members of the Land Use Committee, but it was prudent to get a regulatory scheme in place so in the event that we do get an applicant who wants to locate in the unincorporated areas, we have something in place. So that is there. Anyway, I think that's enough. I have other questions that I have been asked, but I will wait to see if they're asked and we'll go from there. But with that said, I've tried to answer all the questions that I can on this, but I'm happy to answer any additional questions that people might have in regards to what I'm proposing today. I do want to mention, Mr. Chairman, that I will be asking for roll call.
Okay, so we need a motion.
We had a motion.
Motion.
He's had a second.
And there was a second. Who had the
We
second?
had the
Member
second
Solner.
over here, yeah.
Motion by Member Erickson, second by Member Solner. Other comments and questions? Member Gordon?
Point of information, the motion and the second apply to H1A individually,
Yes.
correct? At this moment?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's how Member Erickson wants to do it, fine. Just wanted to be
Yes.
sure.
Anyone else? Roll call, I'm sorry, Member Woolram?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This body has gone to great lengths and taxpayer expense to lure businesses to McLean County, which proudly is well-positioned for the development of new industries in our educated workforce, transition hub, and being the great community that it is. This body has no problem making decisions to spend millions of dollars in tax incentives for this purpose, yet now when brand-new business opportunities are likely to present themselves, we are being asked to shy away from decision-making. By votes of this board alone, we decided to give hundreds of thousands of dollars in local tax incentive to both Brand Industries and Rivian in hopes that they would grow jobs and improve our property tax base. We did this even though members said after one vote that they were not happy with the deal, that they didn't really like the deal, and that the deal was a bitter pill to swallow. Yet today, we have before us a proposal which presents us opportunities for new jobs and improving our tax base, and this refers to what we did in the Land Use Committee, without providing taxpayer incentives. The businesses under discussion will be legal and highly regulated by the state and McLean County ordinances per what we sent, supposing that the Zoning Board of Appeals would pass those. I would like us to remember that the ordinance in front of us requires a zoning board hearing and approval and the county board's approval before any of these businesses could even open. With that being said, let me just quote a few words from the Peoria Journal-Star from August 19, 2019 about the expansion of the marijuana growing and processing center in Delavan in Tazewell County that Ms. Bailey Smith mentioned in her comments this evening. And that is, Delavan is located less than an hour drive southwest of here. At the expansion's groundbreaking ceremony, and yes, they did have a groundbreaking ceremony for their marijuana growing facility, the Delavan mayor, Liz Skinner, said that she could that the facility would possibly employ as many as 300 people in the future, end quote, and went on to say that it was very exciting. They've created jobs, and they've had a positive financial impact on our school district and the city. They've been a great friend and a partner since they came. She added also that we knew early on that this was the kind of business we wanted to be associated with, and boy, were we right. This board, the McLean County Board, should be taking a pro-business development stance for this industry and vote now to allow it. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Schaefer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Some of the things that Ms. Woolreb said, I won't repeat. The one thing that I would like to remind members of the board and the public, if they've forgotten, is that a couple of years ago when medical marijuana was approved by the state, there was an applicant in McLean County, and it went through the Zoning Board of Appeals for their hearing, and when it came to this board, we denied it because we did not think that that was the right location for that facility. And that was just and at that time it wasn't a sure bet that they would get it even if we had approved it. If you listen to the audio, especially if you read the minutes, but if you listen to the audio of the Land Use Committee meeting, it's very clear to me that I think that we have a process through the ZBA that gives us information. We might not always agree with the ZBA, and there have been numerous times that I've not agreed with their decision. However, we are still the ones that make the final decision on that, and they are a fact-finding group for us. So I believe that some of the recommendations that were made at land use on the text amendment were good. I think that we have a process that works, that has worked. Not everybody agrees with the results, but it works. And so I cannot support having this ballot amendment or ballot initiative, whatever you want to call it, advisory, yeah, to be put on the ballot. I just cannot support that. I think we have a process that I think can work well for us, and it has in the past. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Member Johnston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my understanding, if someone can correct me, this is just an advisory, this is a non-binding referendum. So if, once we get the results, what is the purpose? What do we plan to do with the information?
Mr. Erickson, would you like to respond?
Yes, that directed to me, yeah. The purpose would be that the members could decide if they wanted to vote on an opt-out resolution at that time, after we did get the results of the referendum. So I didn't say in my remarks, although I should have said this, is that I support the advisory referendums. It would be my intent if the advisory referendums were to pass, I believe because they're my resolutions, I would pull the opt-out resolution and let us decide in March or April what we were going to do based on what the outcome was of the advisory referendums. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Member Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with what Member Schaefer just said in terms of the established process. I have two concerns that I want to share, and I'll be brief. The first is that I think there's too much potential for confusion in too many people's minds. This is an advisory referendum that would be held countywide, but applicable to only parts of the county. And that concerns me just in terms of how the public interprets what it is we would be putting on the ballot if this board decides to do that. My other concern is a larger issue, it's larger context. I am concerned with the marijuana question, with cannabis, but I'm also concerned that I don't want to see the county board move in the direction of making decisions that will leave us with costs and no revenues, or less in the way of revenue. Yes, these are advisory, and I agree with I agree with the sense of the question that Member Johnston just raised, but my own preference in the larger question is that if the state has authorized this, it brings marijuana use, cannabis use out from some of the shadows and makes it both above board and regulable by county government and by state government. And that's the direction I'd like to see the board go.
Thank you. Other comments? Member Solner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to speak as a representative of a rural district. I've spoken to members of the Farm Bureau. They don't have a local policy. They have a statewide policy that, in general, they're against recreational marijuana. Use that information however you like. But again, I think it's a case where, at this point, I'm not arguing the opt-in or the opt-out. I'm arguing the fact that we have an opportunity to put it on the ballot. And I think we've had times when we've all wished we had an opportunity to do that on lots of issues. I'm not saying that it's something that we need, could do practically every time, but I think, again, this gives the public an opportunity to give their opinion. I know that there's some concern that, the city vote might sway the opinion or whatever, but each of us has an opportunity to look at each particular precinct and what the results were in those votes. So I'm going to support this, and I hope that other members will also. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Member Robustelli?
Mr. Chairman, I intend on opposing this question, and I would like to share a little bit about why. First, I think we all represent McLean County. I don't think that you have to physically represent a rural district to represent McLean County. Every single one of us gets a vote. We're all elected on this board, and our job is to think about what's in the best interest of McLean County, regardless of where we live, regardless of the district that we represent. So I don't understand why we're bringing up physical location as if that should give us some different perspective. I represent McLean County. I think about the county as a whole, and I think all the members on this board do. The reason I think the special use permitting process, and the process the Land Use Committee has gone through is a better option with the public hearing, getting input, developing those rules, and then that process going through, rather than a broad public non-binding referendum, is the public really doesn't know what they're considering. The special use permitting process, there are many different kinds of use. The special use permitting process is a very rigorous process. It's a process that requires a lot of public input. It's a process that actually details a potential project, if there was one. And all these different things that are being proposed are all lumped in, and in one case separated out. But to me, that's a more instructive process for getting public input because it involves direct input, engagement. It provides transparency in terms of what is being proposed, what would be the upsides and downsides. It actively engages the people within that vicinity and that area in dialogue. And then it provides to us a summary report that we can decide to vote for or against based on the best information that we have available and based on what's best for McLean County. So to me, a non-binding public referendum doesn't really move the ball. It'd be better to spend our time developing really good special use permitting processes that ensure that the public will be engaged regardless of what is proposed or what is brought forward, and that we can make an informed decision about what's best for the community.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Any other comments? If none, I'll call the question. Yes, sir. Member Nguyen.
Yeah, I represent an area outside of the cities and some areas within the city of Bloomington. But I just think that it's, once in a while, it's a good idea to let the residents and voters in on making decisions. We don't have to. We can get an advisory thing from them. If we agree with it, then we can go ahead and vote whichever way they want to proceed. If we disagree, then we do have the power to disagree with the referendum. But it would give us all an idea of what the residents of McLean County feel about this particular issue. And I think it's ridiculous, the idea of not allowing the citizens to have some kind of voice in this. Thank you.
Sorry, any other questions? Anybody on round one yet? Okay, round two, Member Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question I'm going to raise is not something that I referred to in round one. I have read the whereases on page 215, and for that matter on page 216, and in all of the whereases there is reference to advisory questions, or at least in the first two. But in the wording of the proposed referendum item itself, there's no indication that this is advisory, and I just want to be sure that it's going to be taken that way by voters if we decide to put it on the ballot. That's a real concern of mine, because if people think they're voting on a binding referendum, it could change, it could affect how they vote. And I think we need to be very clear tonight in the report, in what we do and how it's reported, that this is, by every legal standard and by every legal step along the way, this is an advisory referendum, both this one and potentially the next one.
Thank you, sir. We'll take that into consideration, and if necessary, we'll work on having staff revising that when the time comes. Thank you. Anyone else? Member Wolrath, round two.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'll just pose a question. Anybody has an answer to it, I'd be interested to hear it. If for some reason this was voted to prohibit these businesses in the county, but we wanted to tax the businesses that exist in Normal and Bloomington at the time, how would that make us look as an entity? I mean, we're saying that we're not going to allow the businesses to exist in the county-controlled areas, but we want the tax money from the cities. I think that's a pretty silly stance.
Thank you. Other comments? Member Thompson.
I would just respond to that by saying that we're going to pay the bill for all the problems it's going to cause. So I think we need to collect the tax revenue on the stuff that is sold, marijuana, not stuff, but marijuana. So I have no problem with that.
Okay, thank you. Other comments? Member Erickson, round 2.5.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, the only thing I just want to make sure is that we're clear is that there are two referendums here, and one is to, in my mind, to split the questions off. So we have one that allows a dispensary, so you could tax it, and the other one is for growing. To Member Robustelli, I don't have an issue with the physical location argument. That was just an issue that was raised to me when I was bringing up the referendum. And it's that people said to me, well, Chuck, don't bring up the referendum because you're going to have the whole county vote on it, and only the unincorporated area should vote on it. And I said, I can't, there's no way I can practically do that. It's not practical. And not only is it not practical, it's not how we've ever done things here. So I just said that we all have a right to speak on the subject, and we all represent McLean County. So if my comments were interpreted that I supported this unincorporated, we're going to isolate it, my statement was actually more along the lines is there's no way we can separate it. I mean, I don't know how we can practically do it, even if we wanted to. And even if we wanted to, should we? I mean, we do represent the entire county. We're county government. We represent the entire county. I guess you could say it likewise that rural areas get to vote on issues that are almost pertaining to Bloomington that don't have anything to do with the rural areas. So it is McLean County. So there's no way to get it, and that's why I wanted to do it that way. To answer Member Gordon, we did try to separate this county board has passed advisory referendums in the past. And to say that they weren't confusing, they were confusing. I mean, you can pull out a little piece of language here and say, this makes this horribly confusing. But to some extent, I mean, if you write the thing in elementary terms like, okay, this, and this, that's even going to be more insulting to the voter, okay? I mean, I think it's understood that this is applying to dispensaries, which are allowing for taxing, and growing, which we're not going to allow. But anyway, I want to get back to this point of referendums. Just remind the members that we put, in July of 2018, we put 2 advisory referendums on the ballot. One being, should all holders of elected office in Illinois be subject to term limits? And the second was, should the Illinois General Assembly enact a new property tax to pay the Illinois pension obligations? And the reason I say this is because, Member Murphy, who was a member of the board at that time, said, how can you get people more involved than to put a question on the ballot? We're just letting the people speak. Member Beard said, this is absolutely a relevant issue. Let this influence how they move forward in the next General Assembly. So as I interpret that, Member Beard thought that it was a relevant issue to put this advisory referendum on the ballot so as to give guidance to the General Assembly as to how they should proceed with the issue. So that's all I think we're doing here. We're putting this issue, I don't know how this issue is any less relevant than the term limit issue or the property tax issue. In fact, I think it has more relevance to McLean County voters. So the only reason I'm asking that my preferred course, even some people who like what I'm doing disagreed with me on this, is that I think it ought to really go to the voters. And as Member Beard said, let this influence how they move forward, which meant the General Assembly, or in this case, the county board, moves forward on deciding how to ultimately determine the relevant issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments or questions? If none, I will call a question. Member Johnston, you are round 2.
Okay, thank you. So if we're really looking to get the voice of the voters in McLean County, I guess my question is, why is this going on to the primary instead of to the general when we know there will be a significant, bigger outturn in the general? I mean, if we're looking to really get a sense of what's going on with the county, wouldn't we want to put it to the voters when we're going to have the largest turnout?
Thank you. At this time, I'll call the question. This is a roll call vote. A yes vote supports item H1A exclusively, which is in favor of authorizing electoral authorities to submit cannabis growing, processing, and infusing as an advisory question on a referendum, non-binding. And so at this time, I ask the clerk to call the roll. Chairman will vote in case for time.
Logan Smith? No. James Soldner?
Yes.
Gerald Thompson? Yes. Shana Wachinsky? No. George Wendt?
Yes.
Lori Woolrab? No. Josh Barnett? No. Jacob Beard? No. Lindsay Bloomfield? Abstain. William Casely? Yes. Sharon Chung?
No.
Chuck Erickson? Yes. William John Friedrich?
Yes.
George Gordon?
No.
Elizabeth Johnston?
No.
Randall Martin?
Yes.
Catherine Metzger?
Yes.
Carla Robustelli? No. Susan Schaefer?
No.
6, 7, 8.
We have 8 yes votes and 11 no votes. Is that correct?
Counted, right? And one abstaining.
And 1 abstain.
So 11 to 8, yeah.
You have 10?
10 to 8.
Okay.
10 to 8.
8 yes votes, 10 no votes, the motion is defeated. We'll move on to item H1B. Member Erickson, you want the floor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move item H1B, request approval of a resolution of the McLean County Board authorizing all electoral authorities within the county of McLean to submit the cannabis dispensary advisory question to the voters of McLean County, and I so move.
By Member Erickson, is there a second? Second by Member Soldner. Comments or questions? Member Erickson, you have the floor.
Yeah, I would like
Round one.
to address Member Johnston's question. The reason that it would be put in the primary is because we have to get a decision on it now. I mean, if you look at what the city of Bloomington did last night, they're talking about addressing the full question in the second or third quarter of their upcoming term, okay? They're not waiting for November. And we're at a point now where we've got to get a resolution on this, that we need an answer on it now. I don't think that nothing prohibits any voter from coming and voting in a primary election to come vote in that election. I mean, so if there's motivation to come vote, it'll be there. There was a question raised to me, well, is it going to drive Republican turnout or Democrat turnout? I don't know. I mean, I have no idea. It could drive Democrat turnout. I mean, I don't know. I have no idea how that would come out. So I mean, so there's risk for everybody on this one. So, but the reason that I have proposed it to be in March isn't anything sinister. It's to get an answer so the county board can make a decision on what it should do, because everybody else is making a decision on what they should do, and we need to be moving at some point on these same issues. So I hope that answers your question. I would point out that the H1B is more about the dispensary, and the dispensaries do allow that if the voters should allow a cannabis dispensary in the unincorporated areas, that would allow McLean County to collect the revenue from such a dispensary if it's out there. So that's why I separated the issues, is some people were so inclined that, Chuck, I want the revenue. I don't care what happens. I want the revenue. Okay, well, I put it on the ballot. So if they want the revenue, you can also vote to get the revenue this way too. So that's why I separated it out, was to give people a choice. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Other comments or questions? No other comments? Member Schaefer?
I'm not going to support this either. I guess if people don't realize that it's already being bought and sold out in the county, in the unincorporated areas today, that it's not even under a legal, somewhat legal. I don't know what to say about that. But I look at this, and I've had numerous people talk to me about it, and when it comes to dispensaries, you have to almost kind of look at it like alcohol. Granted, federally, it's not legal. Hopefully someday the feds will get to that point, with 11 states now moving in this direction. And I think that there are going to be more states in the future. However, with alcohol, prohibition didn't work, taxed it and regulated it. And that's what the state is doing. And I mean, I'm sure we could find people that would say, we don't want to have alcoholic establishments out in the unincorporated areas too, if we wanted to do that. So do we want to put an advisory referendum on the ballot for that kind of thing too? I mean, I guess that's what the comments that I've been hearing from people, so.
Thank you. Other comments? If there are no further comments, I'll call a question. Member Erickson?
The reason we're putting this before the county voters, because when the General Assembly passed the legislation to allow cannabis or legalize cannabis, they did give the county the authority and municipalities the authority to opt in or opt out. I mean, they gave us this authority. So that's why we're asking for it to do it. We're not asking to go back and address 1932, 1920, 1919 through 1932 prohibition. What we're doing is doing what the statute allows us to do. And so if the General Assembly says, yes, you have the right to do that, and we're asking for the right to do that, that's what we're asking to do. I would point out, this is the advisory referendum part. We're not to the opt-out yet. This is only to put it on the ballot to get an opinion from the voters. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir, for that clarification. Any other comments? If not, I will call the question, a roll call vote again. The question is H1B, to support request approval of a resolution, McLean County Board authorizing all electoral authorities within the county of McLean to submit the cannabis dispensary advisory question to the voters of McLean County. A yes vote supports H1B, a no vote is against it. Clerk, please call the roll.
Logan Smith. James Sollner. Gerald Thompson.
Yes.
Shana Wachensky. George Wendt.
Yes.
Lori Wolrab. Josh Barnett. Jacob Beard. Lindsey Bloomfield. William Casey. Sharon Chung. Chuck Erickson. William John Friedrich. George Gordon. Elizabeth Johnston. Randall Martin. Catherine Metzger. Carla Robustelli. Susan Schaefer. You're not voting, correct?
There are 8 yes votes, 10 no votes. The motion is defeated. We'll move on to item H1C. Member Erickson, would please read the resolution, and then you can have the floor after we get a second.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move H1C, request approval of Chapter 260 McLean County Cannabis Prohibition Ordinance, and I so move.
Motion by Member Erickson. Is there a second? Second by Member Thompson. Okay, comments or questions? Member Erickson, if you'd like the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is on the opt-out. There are some of us that requested that they be allowed to vote. If I was going to put the advisory referendum on there, which I was more in favor of, that they still wanted to vote on a prohibition ordinance. And so I put that in there with my packet so it would all be included. So there's some members that want to vote on this. You'd have to ask them their reasons why they would want to vote on it. I believe some just want to be on the record as to where they stand. So, and so that's why this last one is in there. But since the county board has not seen the wisdom to put these on as advisory referendum, then we are going, which would be my preference, would have been my preference all along. And if we had got the advisory referendums passed, I would have pulled this one at the last second. But since they failed, I'm going to go ahead and vote in favor of this last one. Thank you.
Other comments? Member Sollner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure there's a whole lot more that can be argued. Again, I'm going to vote to support this mainly because I believe the citizens of my district would like for me to vote that way. I know that There are several communities in my district that, or a few communities that are opting in, going to allow sale of cannabis, and that's fine. They have their own reasons for doing that. But again, I'm going to support this motion to opt out. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Member Wendt?
Yeah, I'm going to support this. I think the constituents in my district would like us to opt out of this type of thing, so I will be supporting it.
Other comments? Member Thompson?
Yeah, I'm going to support this as well. I think, again, it's what the people that I represent believe and would want me to do. I have secondly, I've got a report here from Colorado. It talks about some of the issues and challenges they have faced since they've went to this, and I will spare you the time of reading all of them, but essentially traffic deaths, traffic issues have all gone up. We're not going to stop it. It's here. It's coming. It's already here, actually, not legally. But the hope with this prohibition in the unincorporated is that maybe we can contain it. The sheriff, if you got an issue in Bellflower or to go to Lexington, or you got to go that's a lot of travel, and hopefully that, I mean, there's going to be issues, and maybe we can contain the problems. I don't know. And finally, I would just say that trying to equate businesses in this industry with the Rivian and the Brandt situations, I think you think about what the ultimate impact is on the people that are going to be using this, and there will be people, rest assured, that will abuse this, unfortunate as it may be, but there will be people that will abuse it, and there will be children that will suffer from it, and that's a problem, and that's where I really struggle with this, and I cannot equate the two, and I am a farmer that could benefit possibly from, but I'm not going to go there, and that's where I stand. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Member Casely?
We have means of giving police officers the way of determining whether someone is intoxicated. We have a statutory standard, 0.08, but we don't have a standard here, and we don't have a test that can be easily administered in the field. The only way you can really test for tetrahydrocannabinol is to run a person into a laboratory and draw some blood, and that is going to be expensive, and it's going to be very time consuming. It's going to be difficult for the sheriff to enforce. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Member Robustelli?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I intend on voting against prohibition, and I want to share a little bit about why that is. I find it, for me, really uncomfortable to prohibit an entire legal industry from the rural area of the community. Members of this board, including myself, including Member Erickson and others, have been looking at ways to increase potential business in the rural area, light manufacturing, provide more economic opportunities to the residents out in rural areas that have been hit hard by all sorts of challenges, disruptions in industries, disruptions in technology, et cetera. And I appreciate we have a farmer on the board, and I appreciate that he morally does not support this. But what I have found as I've gone out and talked to residents of McLean County, including in my district and outside, because they are all residents of McLean County, is the overwhelming number of people that I talk to are in support of this industry, of opening this industry. And those that are against it have really good reasons why they're against it, but many of them are against it being legal in the first place. And I appreciate that. I respect that. But that isn't the decision that we have authority to make. We have land use decisions. And reading through the minutes very carefully and hearing what Chairman Erickson had to say about the process that they're going through to develop the standards for evaluating potential projects and development that will come forward, if they will come forward, which I have no idea if they will or won't. But the question before us is, should we eliminate, should we prohibit the opportunity for any project or any development that involved the cultivation or growing or harvesting or processing or whatever of a legal product? That's the question before us. And I am not comfortable cutting all of rural McLean County, the unincorporated areas, off from the possibility of seeing the economic upsides of a huge industry. And so that's why I'll be voting against this.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Member Metzger.
There are a number of townships in our county who prohibit the legal purchasing of alcohol. And it wasn't until 2008 that the township that I live in actually had a referendum to allow the purchase of alcohol in that township. So to imply that because it's legal, that we should certainly not prohibit it is not correct, because it occurs today. And I am voting in favor of this because my constituents, a majority of my constituents, have contacted me and told me that they do not want this in the rural areas. And there are a number of people, very well-respected physicians, attorneys, that do not support this, and they don't want it next door to them. They don't want it in the rural areas, and I have to, I'm voting in favor of this in support of my constituents.
Thank you. Other comments? Member Beard.
Thank you. I'll be voting no. A few comments that I'm on the Land Use Committee, and I think we've got a good process laid out. It was a good discussion, and regardless of how this goes, I think we'll be in a good place with a special use permit process. On the issue at hand, I support the state law. I think from a societal standpoint, majority of people recognize that a criminalization of marijuana was maybe not the best policy that we had, and I think we're rectifying that. That's a good thing. With that being said, I also think it's legitimate that the board considers this. As Member Metzger said, this is a legitimate thing, that it's okay to say at the federal level or even at the state level certain things shouldn't be decided, and at a community level we can decide that. So I don't think it's illegitimate for us to consider this. In the same way, it's not illegitimate to consider, any sort of a business, whether it's where you want casinos, or where you want bars, or where you want, payday loan places. Those are things that local communities have and make those decisions. So I think in that sense, this is a legitimate thing to talk about. And I also, I don't celebrate the idea or look forward to the idea that, man, I hope more and more people, use pot. I hope in 20 years that we become a destination, the Amsterdam of the Midwest. I mean, that's not to say it shouldn't be illegal and people shouldn't go to jail for that is a different thing to say. I want on every street corner, I want every home to smell like, pot. In the same way, I don't want to encourage alcoholism. I don't want to encourage all kinds of things that should be legal but aren't necessarily a part of a healthy society. So I'm sensitive to that, and I'm going to vote no, because I think it is reasonable, it is legal, and we've got a good process in place. But I hope culturally that we're a family-oriented community, and I hope it is something that is used but not abused. But we know we have problems now, and there may be problems with abuse that we will continue to have in the same way that we do for gambling, the same way that we have problems with alcoholism and drunk driving now. So that's a reality. Yeah.
Thank you. Other comments? If none, I'll call the question. I want to remind everyone on page 217, this is McLean County Cannabis Prohibition ordinance. So a yes vote is to opt out. A no vote is not in support of the resolution, sir? No. Would you like a roll call? Yes. Okay, roll call vote. Okay. Clerk, please call the vote. Chairman will vote. A yes vote is to opt out. A no vote is not in favor of the prohibition ordinance as presented in your packet.
Logan Smith? James Soldner?
Yes.
Gerald Thompson?
Yes.
Shana Wachinsky? George Wendt?
Yes.
Lori Walrab? Josh Barnett?
No.
Jacob Beard?
No.
Lindsay Bloomfield? William Casely? Sharon Chung?
No.
Chuck Erickson? William John Friedrich? George Gordon?
No.
Elizabeth Johnston? Randall Martin?
Yes.
Catherine Metzger?
Yes.
Carla Robustelli? Susan Schaefer?
No.
You voting, did you say? No.
Yeah, 10 no votes, yes, 8 yes votes, motion fails. We'll move on. Back to Ms. Rodriguez.
Yes, thank
the floor.
you, Chairman. Thank you so much. I, at this time, with your blessing, would like to bring forward the Executive Director of the Metro McLean County Centralized Communications Center, Mr. Tony Cannon. I would like Mr. Cannon to talk with us about some recent disruptions in our 911 service, and I thought it best efficient to bring him here and have him talk with us.
Thank you, Mr. Cannon. Please come to the podium. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you. This last Tuesday, late afternoon, we received information that some of the 911 calls that were coming in were creating some issues for us, that being they were very staticky. We were having trouble understanding the callers. We submitted a trouble ticket to Frontier, who is our telephone company that handles the call delivery for 911 in McLean County. They started working on the ticket that afternoon, and by early evening, they advised us that the problem had been corrected. During that time period, we feel that we did not lose any callers, that any phone calls were missed during that period. They were just hard to understand, so we were able to get them to call back in, or we were able to get a callback number and talk to them in that fashion. The next day, Wednesday, early to mid-morning, the problem started again. So again, we submitted a trouble ticket to Frontier. They began working on the problem. About 2 o'clock that afternoon, we decided that it was probably time to let the public know that there were some issues. Again, we were not missing any calls. The problem was staticky callers. There's information, there's data that comes in on the calls as well called anti-alley. It's number information and caller location information. We were not getting that data on those calls on Wednesday. So if somebody was unable to talk to us or it was too staticky, we might have had a problem with finding out where they were at. So we decided to let the public know that we were having problems and encourage the public to call the non-emergency numbers. At the same time, we asked Frontier to reroute the 911 calls to those numbers as well. So if somebody missed that message, those calls, if they tried to call 911, they didn't get through, that message would be rerouted through our non-emergency line and we would still get the call. Again, we don't feel like we missed any calls. We've heard nothing of that fashion. Frontier worked on it the remainder of the day. About 8 o'clock Wednesday night, they told us the problem was corrected. Now, they have not told us what the problem was. And that's kind of the problem that we're running into. I don't know if you recall, Mother's Day of this same year, we had another significant disruption in the 911 service. It actually went on for about a day and a half as well. It was a different issue. No calls were being lost. They were just being answered at different locations. So some of our calls were being answered in Livingston County. we were getting some of Livingston County's calls and other counties around the area. At that time, the Mother's Day outage was like 22 different PSAPs, public service answering points. We were told that this latest one affected 20, and I have not received any information as to who those parties are at this point either. After the last time, Mother's Day, we let Frontier know that we were extremely unhappy with the service they were providing us. One of the things that I requested and did not receive for a week and a half was an after-action report that I could present to everyone as to what happened. And they had trouble grasping the idea of an after-action report. So I even went to a conference and explained to them how important it was to provide that information to us, and they assured me they understood. And as of today, I don't have anything. So kind of I think what Ms. Rodriguez wanted me to pass along to you was we're going to take some steps to change that. I found a new term. I'm going to jettison Frontier. Or at least I'm going to propose to the ETSB that we do that. So that's where we're at.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Mr. Cannon? Mrs. Johnston?
Thank you. I did see the messages, and I was trying to forward the information to as many people as possible. Is there any way that when the announcements go out, that the information that it's already being routed, rather than there's no 911 service? Is there any way we can include that in the future messaging if that becomes necessary, so that people aren't panicked that we don't have emergency services?
We did release the information that
Okay.
way. Unfortunately, different outlets released it in different fashion.
Okay.
Obviously, we'll try to make every effort we can in the future, if that happens, to make sure they understand that the wording needs to be correct.
Okay, thank you so much.
Anybody, any other questions? Member Solner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, it sounds like you can't answer this, but do you know, or is it your inclination that it was a hardware problem as opposed to a software problem?
It's going to be a hardware problem. We are currently still utilizing analog service, which the state has started initializing a program called Next Generation 911, where everything will be IP based. We're actually kind of looking at a company to start that early.
Anyone else? Thank you. Ms. Rodriguez?
Chairman, I have no other items to report. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have other business of communication at this time? If there is none, I have bills to be presented and paid in the amount of $2,079,854.37. Is there a motion to approve? Motion by Member Smith, second by Member Worab. Comments or questions? All in favor of approving the bills as presented, please say aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. Appreciate your cooperation, civility, input, and I hope everyone enjoys a very happy holiday, and this meeting is adjourned.